Hello lovely people. In this video we will be evaluating the sound dampening material effectiveness in reducing resonances and everything. But just to put it in simple terms, we're going to see how deadener and foam affects rattles. Now, I have to apologize for my voice because we have a massive viral infection going in our house, and if you noticed, it's 5:20 in the morning on the Christmas Eve because I couldn't fall asleep when I had a coughing fit, so I thought I'm gonna make the best of it. If you watched my previous video where I showed you how I sound treated my doors, this is gonna be all the measurements that I took throughout the whole treatment process. So if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend go back to the previous video and watch the first 10-15 minutes where I explicitly explain how I take the measurements, which ones and why. But just to very quickly recap, I took measurement of a spectrum of different frequencies where I can see some buzzing, some rattling happening, and then I took exactly the same measurements after applying some sound treatment. So basically I have three different measurements. So for example, this one, right door at 68 hertz. So this is before anything was done. This is how it looks like. And then after I did the inner and outer door skin, which is using vibrofilter 4mm CLD and some closed cell foam and 2mm CLD on the inner door skin. And then another measurement when everything is done. By everything I mean the inner, outer door skin and the door panel itself, again with vibrofilter 2mm CLD and 15mm sound absorber open cell foam. And at the same time, these measurements were taken with a factory mid-bass driver from the Skoda, and then I just swapped the driver for Illusion Audio C6s and I took the measurements again. So basically these two measurements are the same, just with different drivers. So this is for the right side, and here you can see there's loads of measurements. On the left side, what I did, a factory speaker with absolutely no sound treatment. Then I replaced the speaker with the Illusion Audio, and again, no sound treatment. And then with the Illusion Audio, I treated only the door card and I didn't treat the inner and outer door skin. So here we're going to see all the spectrum measurements and we're going to evaluate what influences what. So I do have these RTA measurements. Then we're going to have some frequency response measurements. And as I mentioned, one of those is before and after outside. So I think we can start with this one. So these are two measurements. The red one is the frequency response of a mid-bass driver measured outside of the car next to the door, like 1 or 2 feet from the door. And this is the frequency response that I got. And then I took another measurement after treating the inner and the outer door skin only, because the door panel treatment will not affect the sound going outside of the car. It's going to affect most of happening inside of the car. So what differences we can see? It's a bit difficult to see. So what we're going to do is I'm going to apply some smoothing, just 1/3 to smooth it out a little bit. And we have something like this. So we can see that applying sound treatment on the inner and outer door skin and putting some closed cell foam inside the door will reduce the overall sound. That means, as I mentioned in the previous video, it goes both ways. The mid-bass output is reduced, but at the same time, the noise that's coming into the car is reduced as well. If we're going to do this simple math thing, outside before, outside after, I'm going to divide it one by the other, and I'm going to generate a curve. This will give me a difference between these two curves because it's a bit difficult to see. This is the zero line where basically there's no difference between these two curves, but overall we see a 3.5 to 4 dB, I want to say 4 dB reduction in overall level. So basically by applying sound treatment on the inner and outer door skin only, we are more than halving the energy that's coming into the car from outside, because probably you know 3 dB is basically half the energy and this is 4 dB. On higher frequencies it's even more pronounced, like at 360 hertz we have almost 10 dB reduction in level, which is amazing. This area is the most reduced. So it's very, very cool to see that the results are kind of as expected. So the sound treatment really works, and CLD plus closed cell foam does reduce and block the noise a little bit, which is again 4 dB, 10 dB here. Some people might say that it's not a lot at all, but if we look at the energy itself, it's more than halving the energy, which is very, very cool. So now we're going to have a look at different spectrums. So for example, this is the right door playing 68 hertz before any of the sound treatment. And as I mentioned, all of this level is buzzes and rattles that are audible, that you can hear. So we can say like everything above probably like 70, 65 dB. This is dBr, not SPL. So we can see a difference a little bit better. And we can see all of this. So if I'm going to apply some sound treatment on the inner and outer door skin, we will have something like this. And you can see all of these are being totally reduced. We do have some buzzing still happening, but it's barely audible. And if you remember, this 68 hertz buzzing was coming from the door control module that was vibrating and rattling. And this was happening inside of the door. So this is not the door panel itself rattling, but something on the inner door skin that I fixed using just some simple CCF. Now, after treating the door panel in the car, we have something like this. So we can see this level higher. I'm going to explain it why it is, but I'm going to show you this one after I replace the driver. So we can see that the level of all of these are being reduced even further, and especially these high frequency buzzing that is caused by the actual door panel itself. Now the question is why I have this level much higher, because when I took these measurements with all sound treatment done with a factory mid-bass driver, it was raining outside. And I thought that it's not going to show up in the measurements, but it does show up in the measurements as extra noise. So you can see we have probably close to 10 dB extra level in noise. But the difference between a factory mid-bass driver and an aftermarket mid-bass driver, there's no difference. There is just slight difference in the amount of harmonics, which is your THD. But overall, it's kind of the same. So for future, when we're going to analyze all of those, I'm going to disregard the measurement with the factory mid-bass because, as I mentioned, it was raining and it did increase the overall floor noise. But between these, there's literally no difference. So again, this is the difference between treating inner and outer door skin. And this is the difference when I have the door panel treated, which for lower frequencies is not that substantial. So let's have a look at the higher frequencies. This is 80 hertz. Again, all buzzing and rattling, everything. This is after inner and outer door skin is treated. You can see all these buzzes and rattles are go away. And then when you treat the actual door panel, you have this. So again, the door panel, it adds the buzzing in much higher frequencies, like above 1K. We can see here, and all of this. Very high frequency buzzing is the door panel. And all the lower stuff that's like 1K and below, this is influenced by the inner and outer door skin, where you have, as I mentioned, the window mechanism and all that kind of stuff rattling. And we see the same picture in all the other measurements. This is 111 hertz. This is after inner outer door skin. We can see a massive reduction in all of these nonsenses. And then we have this, which is after treating the door skin. And again, it reduces mostly this high frequency content and the very top end. Now again, if I'm going to show you the factory mid-bass driver, just the level different because again, it was raining. Let's go 133. Again, loads of stuff happening. After treating, everything goes down, nothing is buzzing. And then after treating the door card, we have barely any reduction anymore. If we have a look again at higher frequencies, 252, this is after inner and outer door skin. And you can see there's barely any difference. It's just at the very high frequencies. I think this one was the window mechanism that was buzzing a little bit, but treating inner outer door skin, it's very little difference. However, when you treat the door panel, we have again a massive reduction here. So what it looks like that, as I mentioned, treating the inner and outer door skin are going to reduce more or less this range, and treating the door panel is going to reduce this range. That is, if that buzzing is coming from your door panel, because for me, in my particular case, my buzzing was coming mostly from the inside of the door, because my door panels buzz only at the higher frequencies. You can see at about 250. And all the lower buzzing, like 100 hertz and below, that was from the stuff that is inside the door. So this is the right door. Now on the left door, as I mentioned, we have absolutely no sound treatment and factory mid-bass driver. What's going to happen if I'm going to replace the driver and not going to add any sound treatment? Nothing. We have exactly the same. We do have a little bit less here. It might be because I took the door panel out, I put the door panel back in, and maybe some clips were a bit firmer, or maybe something just shifted the resonant frequency. But in general, there's very little difference between changing the mid-bass drivers and having no treatment. And if I treat only the door card with this aftermarket driver, I have this, a massive reduction, especially at high frequencies, not a lower, but at high frequencies. And we see exactly the same picture if we're going to have a look at 108. So this is factory mid-bass, no treatment. Aftermarket mid-bass, no treatment. Exactly the same, there's no difference. And treating the door card removes most of these buzzes and rattles. 135 hertz, same picture. So for this one, for some reason, it shifted the resonant frequency from 135 to 132. So something that I touched slightly reduced the resonant frequency, and it was something in the door panel as well, because when I treated the door panel, the 132 was gone, and I had 135 again. Between two drivers, there's barely any difference. While treating the door card, all of this is going away. 226 hertz was slightly different. Changing the driver here reduced the overall noise. So this, I don't know, at higher frequencies, maybe it was the actual driver buzzing, maybe it was the driver mounting or something around the driver, because this is a substantial noise reduction when you compare to all the others. So at higher frequencies, swapping out the driver did affect things, but we still have quite a lot of these, and treating the door skin reduces these even further. Just like that. So 226 before and after, a massive difference. And the last one, the highest frequency, 285, after replacing the driver, basically nothing. Just a little bit here at the very, very top end. And again, this could be something to do with the actual driver. But treating the door card reduced all of these to nothing. See? There's just harmonics. Fundamental, second, third, and fourth harmonic. And that's it. So treating the door card did reduce all of this high frequency content. And lastly, let's have a look at the frequency response and waterfall and distortion. So for analyzing this, I think it's better to apply some smoothing. This is 3 measurements. We have on the left side factory driver, aftermarket driver, and aftermarket driver with treated door card. And we can see that like 200 and below, there is no difference. There's barely just 1-2 dB. It could be just a measurement error. We do have this, which with factory driver and no sound treatment, it kind of coincides with the buzzing frequency that I have. So on the left side, the buzzing was at 135, and this is at, 135. So it could be that all these buzzing frequencies that I have, they might show up in the frequency response as well. But the main thing, so if we have a look, factory driver, it does play a bit higher. It does have the upper frequency response, whereas the Illusion Audio, it kind of rolls off. So for this, to better analyze it, let's apply 1/3 smoothing, and then we can see that swapping out drivers like this, it does affect something, but it's mainly the frequency response due to the actual driver roll-off. However, treating the door card versus untreated door card, the frequency response doesn't change, which is expected. Now, if we're going to have a look at the other side with a partial treatment, so this was with absolutely no treatment, and we do have all of this, which is, I don't know why it shows up like this, but this is the main buzzing that I had in the door. And I had here as well at like 250 or something, so it's not nice. When I treated the inner and outer door skin, it was like this. So this, probably the buzzing a little bit shifted, which kind of smooths out this end, because at the lowest frequencies, it doesn't vibrate as much, as we saw from the Spectrum as well, doing the inner and outer door skin, because that was the door control module that was buzzing. But all the other stuff, it's almost the same. And if we do the door skin at the top, it does change some stuff, but not massively. So this is interesting. It could be that the foam that I put around the speaker opening inside of the door card, that might be affecting these higher frequencies. But the low frequencies, like below 200 or so, like this, it's kind of the same. And if we apply, again, 1/3 smoothing, there's barely any difference between these. So now let's have a look at the distortion. And let's start with this. This is both sides with absolutely no sound treatment. So on the left side, we see distortion at here where it's buzzing the most, 84% distortion, which is just pure buzzing. There's no sound, but literally just buzzing. And we do have a mountain here, about 110, another mountain here, another mountain here. And these distortion peaks kind of correspond with the buzzing that I have. So let's have a look. This is the left side, and on the left we had 82, which is here, distortion peak, that's buzzing. So 108, which is here, close to that peak. 135, which coincides with this peak almost. Then 226, which is here, another mountain. And lastly, 285, which is somewhere here for some reason in this minimum. But yeah, distortion is basically where you have all the buzzing, mostly, not all of them, but mostly. And these numbers are extremely high. So let's have a look what happens if you have no treatment and you just literally just replace the driver, which a lot of people do. They put very expensive drivers and they don't treat the door, and there's barely any difference. So we still have, I'm going to remove this, 5 to 10% distortion throughout the range, and this is playing at maybe like 80-85 dB, so it's low volume. And when you have this distortion 5 to 10%, it's clearly going to be audible and it's going to influence the sound, and it's not going to sound nice. So replacing the driver with no sound treatment does nothing. You will not get better SQ, you will not get better sound, you will not get better mid-bass. If you purely replace the driver and we're not going to treat anything, you're not accomplishing absolutely anything. Now, we do see an increase in distortion at lower frequencies between these two drivers, and I'm really not sure why, because if we're going to have a look at the SPL, it's kind of the same, it's just a few dB difference, but the factory mid-bass is a little bit cleaner compared to the aftermarket. But this is, again, this is much lower than you usually play. You would cross the mid-bass drivers about 70-80 hertz here. So this doesn't really matter. So let's have a look what's happening if we're going to have replaced our speaker and we're going to treat the door card only. We have this. We have a massive reduction in distortion in all the range from 5 to 10% all the way down to, let's have a look, 3 to 2% and lower, which is much better. However, it's still relatively poor. So now let's have a look at the other side where we did the partial treatment. This is with no treatment. And again, 70-80%, 30% distortion is just literally horrible. When you treat the inner and the outer door skin, you have this massive reduction in these peaks, especially this one at like about 100 hertz, where you go from 30% distortion all the way down to 3%. It's a massive reduction in distortion. So we have this, and on top, when you treat the door card as well, you have this, a drastic decrease in distortion throughout the whole range. Probably this is the only range from 90 to 120 where distortion didn't decrease, but everything is decreased. So if we're going to compare a factory mid-bass driver with a fully treated door inner outer skin, and the door card itself with a premium driver with absolutely no sound treatment, we can see that the picture is pretty clear. Without any sound treatment, with a super expensive driver, you're still getting 10%, 5% distortion throughout the range, whereas with factory mid-bass driver and proper sound treatment, you're getting 2% and down to 0.5% throughout the range. I'm going to ignore this peak because if you're going to cross it at 80, all of this is going to go away. So if we're going to have a look at like from 80 all the way up, this is a massive difference. So for people that literally replace the drivers and don't do any sound treatment, this is an obvious graph to see. And I watched quite a lot of Nick Apicella's videos, and he did mention that sound treating the doors will reduce your distortion levels, and this is exactly what we see. You will get much better results sticking with your factory speakers and treating everything compared to no treatment and aftermarket speakers. And lastly, let's have a look at the spectrograms. I'm not going to have a look at waterfalls because, to be honest, for some reason waterfalls don't show me everything that I want to see. I can show you this is no treatment and outer door skin and all treatment, and this is factory, premium driver, and premium driver with door card. It doesn't show a big difference to me. So I'm looking at the spectrogram, and with the spectrogram I can see, for example, this is on the right side was a factory driver with no sound treatment, and this is basically how the sound propagates in time. So we have everything calming down at like close to 200 milliseconds and lower than that. However, we have something here at 70 hertz where it rings in time time and lowers in frequency. So this is literally something ringing. And at this frequency, there was that door module that was buzzing, vibrating, and probably ringing. When I treat the inner and outer door skin, all of this goes away. All the ringing, we still have something here about 60 hertz, which stretches up to 300 milliseconds. But overall, we have a very similar picture, 200 milliseconds and lower. And when we treat the door card itself, it removes some energy at the higher frequency. So if we're going to compare this and this, we can see there is a slight reduction of ringing at higher frequencies. So it's not a very substantial thing because everything in a car still rings. But if we compare no treatment with proper treatment, there is a big difference. And on the other side, where we have the factory driver, it does ring quite a lot everywhere. You can see these peaks stretching in time up to like 300 milliseconds. When we replace the driver, there's barely any difference. It still rings because the door panels and the door card rings, not the actual speaker. And when we treat the door skin, I think we see some reduction here in this area at the higher frequencies. You can see there's a bit less stuff happening. But for lower frequencies, I think it's exactly the same. So if we will try to summarize this, personally, I have never seen anything like this done before, because everybody, what they do, they just test SPL levels before and after, but no in-depth testing. So my conclusions are that sound treating the door will give you much better results than, I hope I'm going to finish in time, than replacing the driver. You need to treat both the door cards and the door skins to get the best result. Replacing the driver for a better one is not going to do anything for you. And in my particular car, I have more buzzes and rattles from the inside of the door rather than the door card itself. Your case might be totally different. You might have more buzzes and rattles coming from the door card. So again, treating both the door card and the inner and outer door skin will give you the best results. Adding CCF inside the door skin, inside the actual door, on top of your CLD will reduce the noise that's coming from the outside into the car. So feel free to do that. And final conclusion, even after the door treatment is done, doors are still a bad location for a mid-bass driver. So I did this experiment because I wanted to see and I wanted to show you, and I will keep the mid-bass drivers in the doors for a bit, but eventually I will still go to kicks. And when I'm going to finish the kicks, we will try to compare the data from the kicks with these door mid-bass drivers. So stay tuned for that. It's gonna take a long time, but now I think we're done with this. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely holiday season, and I will see you in the next one.